The storm outside rattled the hospital windows as Elena gripped the metal rails of the delivery bed. Her knuckles white, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Rain lashed against the glass like 1,000 desperate fingers trying to break through. She had made it. 8 months of hiding, of running, of sleeping in different apartments, of paying only in cash, of becoming a ghost in a city where she once danced at his side, and she had made it. The baby was coming. She was alone, safe, free. Then the delivery room doors opened, and Luca Moretti walked in. His steel-gray eyes found hers across the sterile white room, and the world stopped. The machines beeped, the thunder rolled, and Elena's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces because she knew. Looking at the most feared Mafia boss in the city standing in that doorway, rain still dripping from his tailored black coat, the crowned wolf tattooed on his neck visible above his collar, that she had never been hiding at all. She had only been waiting. Before we continue with this emotional journey, I want to thank you for being here. Your support means everything. Please like, share, and subscribe so we can bring you more stories like this one. The fluorescent lights hummed above Elena's head as the contraction subsided, leaving her trembling and soaked in sweat. She couldn't look away from him, couldn't blink, couldn't breathe. Luca stood motionless in the doorway, his broad shoulders filling the frame, his lean muscular build wrapped in that signature black suit that cost more than most people's cars. Water pooled beneath his Italian leather shoes. His dark hair, usually slicked back with perfect precision, was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running to find her. How? The question screamed through her mind even as another contraction began building low in her belly. How did he find me? Everyone out. His voice was quiet, soft even, but it carried the weight of absolute authority, the kind that made doctors freeze mid-motion and nurses lower their instruments without question, the kind that had made entire criminal empires bow before him. "Sir, we can't." The attending physician started. Luca's gaze never left Elena's face. "I said everyone out. Now." The room emptied in seconds. The door clicked shut behind the last nurse, and suddenly it was just the two of them, and the child fighting to be born between them. Elena's chest heaved as she tried to sit up, tried to find words, tried to find anything resembling the courage she'd once had. Luca! 8 months. He moved toward her slowly, each step measured, controlled, like a predator who had finally cornered his prey and saw no need to rush. The sleeve tattoos on his forearms rippled as he removed his wet coat and draped it over a chair. Angels and rosary beads and Roman numerals marking time she tried to steal from him. 8 months, Elena. Do you have any idea what I've done? What I've become? She flinched at the rawness in his voice. She had expected anger, rage, the cold, calculating fury of a man who'd been betrayed. What she heard instead was something far more devastating. She heard pain. I couldn't. Another contraction seized her, and she cried out, her back arching off the bed. The monitors spiked. Somewhere beyond the door, she heard voices raised in concern, but no one entered. No one would dare. And then his hand was on hers. Elena's eyes flew open to find Luca standing beside the bed, his knuckles, Sang and UE tattooed across them, spelling Sang, blood, wrapped around her fingers with impossible gentleness. His jaw was tight, his gray eyes burning with something she couldn't name, but his touch was tender. Breathe, he commanded softly. Look at me and breathe. She didn't want to obey him. She had spent 8 months learning how not to obey him, how not to need him, how not to love him. But her body responded to his voice the way it always had, the way it had from the very first night they met, surrendering before her mind could catch up. She breathed. The contraction passed. Luca didn't release her hand. I was going to tell you, she whispered, tears streaming down her temples. Eventually. I swear I was going to. When? The word cracked like a whip. When she was 5, 10, graduating university. His free hand came up to cup her jaw, forcing her to meet his gaze. Up close, she could see the exhaustion carved into his handsome face, the shadows beneath his steel-gray eyes, the new tension lines around his mouth. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in months. When were you going to tell me I had a child, Elena? He'd said she. How do you know it's a girl? The question tumbled out before she could stop it. Something flickered across Luca's face. Something soft and wounded and terrifyingly human. Because I've had people watching you since the 6th month. Because I know what you eat for breakfast and which prenatal vitamins you take, and that you talk to her at night when you think no one's listening. His thumb traced her cheekbone, wiping away tears she hadn't realized she was still crying. I know everything, Elena. Except the only thing that matters. Her lips trembled. What? Why? His voice dropped to barely a whisper. Why did you run from me? The next contraction hit before she could answer, harder than the others, and this time Elena screamed. Luca's hand tightened around hers as he shouted for the doctors, his composure finally cracking, and within seconds the room was flooded with medical staff who had been waiting just outside. But even as they worked, even as she pushed and cried and fought to bring their daughter into the world, Elena could feel his eyes on her, could feel his presence like a physical force, solid, unyielding, terrifyingly permanent. She had run for 8 months. Now there was nowhere left to go. Sofia Moretti entered the world at 11:47 p.m., crying so loudly that Elena laughed through her exhausted tears. She was perfect. 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, a shock of dark hair that was unmistakably her father's. And when she finally opened her eyes, squinting against the bright lights, Elena's heart stopped. Steel gray, the exact shade of her father's. The nurse placed the baby on Elena's chest, and for a long moment, nothing else existed. Not the hospital, not the storm still raging outside, not the dangerous man standing frozen at the foot of the bed. There was only warmth, only love, only this miraculous little person who had grown inside her, who had kept her company through 8 months of loneliness and fear. Hi, Sofia, Elena breathed, pressing her lips to her daughter's downy head. Hi, my beautiful girl. Sofia. Luca's voice was strange, thick. Elena looked up to find him staring at the baby with an expression she had never seen on his face in the 3 years they'd been together. His jaw worked silently. His hands, those terrifying hands that had ordered deaths and signed death warrants and wielded power like a weapon, were trembling at his sides. Her name is Sofia, Elena confirmed quietly. Sofia Moretti. She watched the impact of those words hit him, watched his throat bob as he swallowed hard, watched his steel-gray eyes, the same eyes now blinking sleepily in their daughter's face, grow bright with moisture he would never admit to. Moretti, he repeated. Elena nodded. Whatever else she had denied him, presence, knowledge, choice, she had never considered giving the baby another name. She's yours, Luca. She was always yours. He moved toward them slowly, as if approaching something sacred, something that might shatter if he breathed too hard. When he reached the bedside, he stopped, his gaze fixed on the tiny bundle cradled against Elena's breast. His hands flexed at his sides. Open, close, open, close. The sang tattoos caught the light with each movement. Can I? He stopped, started again. May I hold her? The vulnerability in his voice cracked something open inside Elena. This was not the Mafia boss who controlled half of the city's underground. This was not the man who had made kings kneel and rivals disappear. This was just a father, meeting his daughter for the first time, terrified that he might break her. Sit down, Elena said softly. Support her head. He lowered himself into the chair beside the bed with exaggerated care, his movements stiff and uncertain. When Elena transferred Sofia into his arms, she heard his breath catch, watched his entire body go still. The baby fussed for a moment, then settled against his chest, one tiny fist curling around his pinky finger, right above the E in sang. Luca Moretti, terror of the underworld, looked down at his daughter and fell apart. A single tear escaped down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away, didn't acknowledge it, just sat there holding Sofia like she was made of glass and stardust. His lips pressed together so tightly they'd gone white. She's so small, he whispered. How can anything be this small? Elena's own tears fell freely now. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times during her pregnancy. Sometimes with longing, sometimes with terror. She had pictured him angry, possessive, demanding. What she had never pictured was this raw, unguarded tenderness, this immediate, overwhelming love. "She has your eyes," Elena said. Luca looked up at her, and the weight of everything unsaid hung between them. 8 months of silence, 8 months of searching, 8 months of fear and loneliness and questions that had no good answers. "She has your nose," he replied quietly, "and your chin. She's going to be beautiful." They stared at each other across the sterile hospital room while their daughter slept peacefully between them, and Elena felt the walls she'd built beginning to crack. She couldn't let them fall. "Not yet. We need to talk," she said finally. "About what happens now." Luca's expression shuddered slightly, that familiar mask of control sliding back into place. But his hold on Sofia remained achingly gentle. "Now," he said slowly, "you come home." "Luca, this isn't a negotiation, Elena." His voice hardened, though he kept it low to avoid disturbing the baby. "You've been living in a one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood I wouldn't let my enemies inhabit. You've been working double shifts at a restaurant that pays you half what you're worth. You've been hiding from me like I'm some kind of monster. That's not. I have enemies," he continued, his gray eyes boring into hers. "Real enemies who would kill for the leverage you've just handed them. Do you understand what you've done? Do you understand what could have happened if someone other than my people had found you first?" The words hit like a slap. Elena's arms wrapped protectively around her middle, even though the baby was no longer there. "I was careful. You were lucky." Luca stood, cradling Sofia against his chest with one arm as he moved to the window, his back to Elena. Lightning illuminated his silhouette, tall, broad, dangerous. "Lucky that I found you before they did. Lucky that Matteo Ferretti's men were following the wrong lead in Rome while mine were watching you here. Lucky that—" He stopped abruptly. "Matteo Ferretti?" Elena's blood ran cold. She knew that name. Everyone in their world knew that name. "He was looking for me?" Luca turned slowly. In the dim light from the monitors, his face was a study in shadows and barely contained rage. 3 of his men were seen near your building last month. They were dealt with before they could report back. Dealt with. The clinical phrase couldn't disguise what it meant. What it always meant in his world. "You killed them. I protected you." His voice was flat, unapologetic. "The same way I'll always protect you, whether you want it or not. The same way I'll protect her." He looked down at Sofia, and his expression softened into something almost painful to witness. "No one touches what's mine, Elena. No one. And this child, our child, is more mine than anything I've ever possessed in my life." The words should have frightened her. They were possessive, controlling, everything she'd feared when she made the decision to run. But the way he said them, the way he looked at Sofia when he said them, made her heart twist in ways she couldn't afford. "You can't just claim us like property," Elena said weakly. "I'm not claiming you as property." He moved back to the bed, lowering himself into the chair with Sofia still clutched carefully against his chest. His free hand reached out to brush a strand of damp hair from Elena's face. "I'm claiming you as family. There's a difference." "Is there?" Her voice cracked. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly the same." Luca's jaw tightened. For a long moment, he said nothing, just studied her face with those unreadable gray eyes. Then, slowly, he lifted Sofia and placed her back in Elena's arms. "Get some rest," he said quietly. "We'll talk more tomorrow." He stood, reaching for his discarded coat. "You're leaving." She hated the note of panic in her voice, but she couldn't help it. After 8 months of running, of hiding, of sleeping with one eye open, the thought of being alone again felt suddenly unbearable. Luca paused at the door. When he turned back, his expression was unreadable. "I'll be right outside. No one enters this room without my permission. No one gets within 50 feet of you or Sofia without going through me first." His hand found the doorknob. "Luca," She didn't know what she was going to say, didn't know what she wanted from him. But his name fell from her lips anyway, a reflex she'd never managed to break. He waited. "Thank you," she whispered finally, "for being here, for being gentle with her." Something cracked in his composure. Just for an instant, just enough for her to glimpse the raw wound beneath. "I've been many things in my life, Elena, most of them terrible. But I would burn this entire city to the ground before I let anyone hurt that child." His voice dropped. "Or her mother." The door closed behind him with a soft click. Elena looked down at Sofia, sleeping peacefully in her arms, and tried to remember why she had ever thought running was the right choice. She couldn't. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and interrupted sleep and the constant, overwhelming presence of Luca Moretti. True to his word, he never left. Guards rotated outside her hospital room in silent shifts. Large men in dark suits who nodded respectfully when nurses passed but whose eyes never stopped scanning for threats. The nursing staff treated Elena like visiting royalty, their deference making it painfully clear that Luca's influence extended far beyond the criminal underworld. He visited every few hours, always alone, always bearing gifts. A cashmere blanket for Sofia. French pastries from Elena's favorite bakery. Fresh flowers to replace the ones that had barely begun to wilt. He never stayed long, never pushed for conversations she wasn't ready to have, but his presence was everywhere. In the guards' respectful silence, in the doctor's nervous smiles, in the way the hospital seemed to hold its breath whenever he walked through. On the third day, he arrived with a car seat. "The discharge papers are signed," he said without preamble, setting the carrier on the bedside table. "There's a car waiting downstairs." Elena looked up from where she'd been nursing Sofia. A car to where? Home. The word landed like a stone in her stomach. "Luca, I told you. I heard you." He didn't raise his voice, but something in his tone made her fall silent. "You're afraid of my world. You're afraid of what it means to raise a child in it. You're afraid of what I am." He moved closer, his gray eyes holding hers with unnerving intensity. "What you don't seem to understand is that none of that matters anymore. She exists. You exist. And I will not let either of you exist outside my protection. I have an apartment, which has already been packed up. Your things are at the estate." Elena's blood chilled. "You had no right. I have every right." He was close enough now that she could smell his cologne. Cedar and something darker, something that immediately transported her back to heated nights in silk sheets, to whispered confessions in the dark, to a time when she'd believed loving him might actually be survivable. "You kept my daughter from me for 8 months. You denied me the chance to feel her kick, to see the ultrasounds, to hold your hair back when you were sick in the mornings." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "You denied me everything, and I let you go anyway because you seemed happy, because you seemed safe." A tear slipped down Elena's cheek. "Luca, but you weren't safe." His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing the path of her tear with devastating gentleness. "And you weren't happy. I could see it in the surveillance footage, the way you cried at night, the way you talked to your belly like she was the only friend you had. You were alone, Elena, terrified and alone. And I can never forgive myself for letting that happen." She closed her eyes against the onslaught of emotion. "I chose to leave. And I chose not to drag you back." His forehead pressed against hers. "We both made mistakes. The difference is mine nearly got you killed." The ride to the Moretti estate took 45 minutes. Elena sat in the back of the bulletproof SUV, Sofia sleeping in the car seat beside her, Luca a solid presence in the front passenger seat. He didn't turn around, didn't speak, but she could feel the tension radiating from his shoulders. When the gates finally came into view, wrought iron monstrosities adorned with the family crest, Elena's breath caught. She had lived here for 2 years once, had walked these gardens, swum in these pools, slept in these bedrooms. It had never felt like home. It had always felt like a gilded cage. "I've prepared the West Wing for you and Sofia," Luca said as the car glided up the circular drive. "You'll have your own suite, bedroom, nursery, sitting room. Complete privacy. And where will you be? His shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly. The East Wing, where I've always been. Separate wings, separate lives. She didn't know whether to feel relieved or devastated. The staff has been briefed, he continued as the car rolled to a stop. They answer to you regarding Sofia's care. Anything you need, formula, diapers, clothing, toys, you have only to ask. Luca, I don't want your staff. Then hire your own. He turned to face her for the first time since they'd left the hospital, and the exhaustion in his eyes made her chest ache. I don't care who takes care of her, Elena. I only care that she's taken care of. That you're both taken care of. He paused. And that you're here, where I can see you, where I know you're safe. The driver opened her door before she could respond. She stepped out into the early evening air, inhaling the familiar scent of jasmine from the gardens, and felt the walls of the past closing in around her. The West Wing was more beautiful than she remembered. All cream-colored walls and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the rose gardens. The nursery had been decorated in soft shades of lavender and white, with a crib that looked like it cost more than Elena's old apartment, and a rocking chair positioned perfectly to catch the morning light. I had my sister choose the decor, Luca said from the doorway. She has better taste than I do. Elena turned, surprised. Valentina? I didn't know she was. Back in the country? She arrived last week. When I told her about Sofia, she nearly drove straight here from the airport. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. She's very eager to meet her niece. The mention of family made something twist in Elena's chest. She had missed this, the small moments, the shared histories, the sense of belonging to something larger than herself. She had tried to convince herself that independence was worth the loneliness. But standing here now, in this beautiful room that had been prepared with such obvious care, she couldn't remember why. The staff will bring dinner to your suite in an hour, Luca said, stepping back toward the door. Unless you'd prefer to join me in the dining room. Join him. Sit across from him at that long mahogany table where she'd once shared meals and wine and conversation that lasted until the early hours of the morning. Look into those steel-gray eyes and pretend that her heart didn't still ache for him. I'll eat here, she said quietly. Thank you. Something flickered across his face. Disappointment, maybe, or resignation. But he only nodded. As you wish. He was almost out the door when her voice stopped him. Luca. He turned. She struggled to find the words. I know you're angry with me. I know you have every right to be. But I need you to understand. I didn't run because I stopped loving you. His entire body went still. Then why? Elena's gaze drifted to the crib, to the soft lavender blankets, to the small stuffed elephant she recognized from a shop she'd visited once with his sister. Because I loved you too much. Because I knew what your world would do to her, to us. And I was terrified that if I stayed, I would watch you turn her into something like you. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Something like me, Luca repeated flatly. I didn't mean. You meant exactly what you said. He turned to face her fully, and the pain in his eyes was almost unbearable to witness. You think I'm a monster. You think I would hurt our daughter. No. Then what? He crossed the room in 3 long strides, stopping just inches from her. Up close, she could see the shadows of sleepless nights carved into his face, the tension in his jaw, the barely contained turmoil behind his eyes. Tell me what terrible fate you imagined for her. Tell me what I would have done that made running seem like the safer choice. Elena's throat closed. I was scared. Of what? His hands gripped her shoulders. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough that she couldn't look away. Of me? Of my money? My power? My protection? Of losing her? The words tore from her throat before she could stop them. Of losing her the way your mother lost Valentina, the way your father lost Marco, the way everyone in your family loses someone eventually because that's what happens in your world, Luca. People die. Children become orphans. And I couldn't. Her voice broke. I couldn't take that risk. Not with her. Not with our baby. The words hung between them like shattered glass. Luca released her shoulders slowly, stepped back. His face had gone pale, his expression shuddered, unreadable. My mother, he said quietly, lost Valentina because she trusted the wrong people. My father lost Marco because he made enemies carelessly and protected nothing adequately. His voice dropped. I am not my parents, Elena. I have spent my entire life making sure I am nothing like my parents. I know that. Do you? He moved to the window, his back to her, his silhouette outlined against the fading evening light. Because from where I'm standing, it seems like you looked at me and saw only the violence, only the danger, only the blood. His voice caught. You never saw the rest. Elena's heart shattered. That's not true. Then why didn't you come to me? He turned, and the raw anguish on his face made her physically ache. When you found out you were pregnant, why didn't you come to me first? Why didn't you give me the chance to prove I could be different? To prove I could be a father? The question she had been dreading since the moment he walked into that delivery room. She couldn't lie to him. Not anymore. Because I tried, she whispered. I tried to tell you, Luca. I called you 17 times on the night I found out. Do you remember that night? His brow furrowed. The Bellini deal. I was in negotiations until 3 in the morning. Yes. And when you finally called me back, do you know what you said? He went still. You said, Elena, I can't talk right now. There's a situation. Her voice trembled. And then I didn't hear from you for 4 days. For days, Luca. I thought you were dead. I thought you were hurt. I was carrying your child and I thought I might never see you again. And when you finally walked through that door, do you know what you did? Elena, you fell asleep. Tears streamed down her face now, months of suppressed grief pouring out. You walked in, you kissed my forehead, you told me you loved me, and you fell asleep in our bed without even asking how I was. And I finally realized that I would always come second. That work would always come first. That if I stayed, if I raised a child in this house, she would grow up the same way you did. Alone. Waiting for a father who was always handling situations. The silence was deafening. Luca stared at her with something that looked horrifically like recognition. Horror. Understanding. The Bellini deal, he said slowly, was a cover. I was being held hostage by Matteo Ferretti's men. They had photographs of you, Elena. Photographs of our apartment. They were threatening to... He stopped abruptly, his hands clenching at his sides. I didn't call because I physically couldn't call. I didn't come home because I was negotiating for both our lives. Elena's blood ran cold. What? Nico got me out after 72 hours. I came home the moment I was freed. His voice was hollow. I fell asleep because I hadn't slept in 4 days. Because I had been tied to a chair. Watching video feeds of you walking to work, eating breakfast, completely unaware that any moment could be your last. He moved toward her slowly. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to know. I didn't want you to be afraid. Luca, I was protecting you. His hands found her face, tilting it up to meet his gaze. I've always been protecting you, even when you didn't know it. Even when you thought I was neglecting you. His forehead pressed against hers. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that I made you feel alone. I'm sorry I didn't find a way to tell you the truth. Elena was crying openly now, her hands clutching the lapels of his suit jacket. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you ever? Because I'm a proud, stubborn fool who thought he could keep you safe by keeping you ignorant. His voice cracked. And instead, I lost you. I lost 8 months with our daughter. I lost everything that matters because I didn't know how to be vulnerable. They stood there in the fading light, holding each other. 8 months of pain and misunderstanding flowing between them like a river finally breaking through a dam. Sofia slept peacefully in the next room, oblivious to the fractures being healed just feet from her crib. I can't go back to how things were, Elena whispered finally. I can't be the woman who waits and wonders and pretends not to know what you do when you leave. I know. I need truth, Luca. I need partnership. I need to know that Sofia will have a father who's present, not just protective. His arms tightened around her. I'll give you all of it. Every truth, every fear, every ugly detail you want to know. I'll build you a life where you never have to wonder again. She pulled back slightly, searching his face. How can I trust that? Because I'm not asking you to come back to me. His thumbs traced her cheekbones. I'm asking for the chance to earn you back. One day at a time. One truth at a time. For as long as it takes. Weeks passed. True to his word, Luca gave her space. He didn't push for shared meals or late-night conversations. He didn't appear at her door uninvited or find excuses to be in her wing of the house. But his presence was constant in other ways. In the fresh flowers that appeared in her sitting room each morning. In the books she mentioned wanting that materialized on her bedside table. In the way he always seemed to know when she needed the nursery restocked before she'd even noticed the diapers were running low. And then there was Sofia. If Elena had harbored any doubts about Luca's capacity for gentleness, watching him with their daughter would have shattered them completely. He visited the nursery every evening, always at the same time, always wearing slightly less formal attire. Sleeves rolled up to reveal the sleeve tattoos covering his forearms, collar unbuttoned enough to show the crowned wolf inked on his neck. He would settle into the rocking chair with Sofia cradled against his chest, and something in his face would transform completely. Gone was the cold calculation, the dangerous edge, the carefully controlled mask. In its place was a softness she had never seen before, a tenderness that made her heart ache with a grief she couldn't quite name. He would whisper to Sofia in Italian, telling her stories about her grandparents, about the house, about the roses in the garden that he would teach her to tend when she was old enough. He would trace her tiny features with his finger, marveling at each one like she was a miracle he still couldn't believe was real. Some nights, Elena would stand in the doorway and watch without announcing herself. She told herself she was just checking on the baby, just making sure everything was fine. But the truth was harder to admit. She was watching him, studying him, trying to reconcile the man she saw with the monster she had convinced herself he must be. One evening, she found him not in the rocking chair but standing at the nursery window, Sofia asleep against his shoulder. The sunset painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, and in its glow he looked almost peaceful. "She has your hands," he said without turning around. "Have you noticed? The same shape, the same way she curls her fingers when she sleeps." Elena moved to stand beside him. "I've noticed. She's going to be stubborn." A hint of a smile tugged at his lips. "I can already tell. She refuses to eat when she doesn't want to, and she screams until she gets exactly what she needs." He glanced at her sideways. "Just like her mother." "I don't scream. You don't have to." His gray eyes held hers. "Your silence is louder than any scream could be." She didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to explain that her silence had been the only armor she had, the only way to protect the fragments of her heart that still ached for him. "Marco called earlier," Luca said, turning back to the window. "He says Matteo Ferretti has been making moves, testing boundaries. Nothing direct yet, but—" "Luca," she touched his arm, stopping him. "You said you'd tell me the truth. Does that mean the dangerous truth too?" He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was measured. "Ferretti knows about Sofia. I don't know how. There's a leak somewhere in my organization, and I'm working to find it. But he knows I have a daughter, and he's been making inquiries about her mother." Elena's blood chilled. "What kind of inquiries?" "The kind that tell me he's planning something." Luca's jaw tightened. "I've doubled the security on the estate. Nico has people watching every entrance, every exit. No one gets within a mile of you or Sofia without my knowing. And if that's not enough?" He turned to face her fully, and the look in his eyes was something she had never seen before. Cold fury mixed with desperate fear. "Then I will burn every bridge Matteo Ferretti has ever crossed and bury him beneath the ashes. I will dismantle his empire piece by piece until there's nothing left. And I will do it without hesitation, without mercy, because anyone who threatens my family forfeits the right to breathe." The words should have terrified her. Instead, they made her feel safe. "I trust you," she whispered. "I don't know when that happened, but I do. I trust you to keep us safe." Something broke open in his expression, relief, maybe, or hope. Elena, I'm not ready for more yet. She stepped back, creating necessary distance. I need more time, but I want you to know that I see you. I see what you're doing. And I'm grateful. He nodded slowly. Time is the one thing I have plenty of. Take as much as you need. She made it almost to the door before his voice stopped her. Elena, she turned. He was still standing at the window, Sofia sleeping peacefully against his shoulder, the dying sunlight catching the tattoos on his neck and hands. In that moment, he looked not like a mafia boss but like a father, a man, someone fragile enough to break. I never stopped loving you, he said quietly. Not for a single day in 8 months. You should know that. The words followed her all the way back to her room, where she lay awake until dawn, replaying them in her mind like a song she couldn't quite forget. The charity gala arrived 3 weeks later, and despite her protests, Elena found herself being dressed in a gown of midnight blue silk that fit her postpartum body like it had been sewn directly onto her skin. Luca's sister Valentina had chosen it, in fact, chosen everything about Elena's appearance tonight, from the delicate diamond studs in her ears to the way her dark hair fell in soft waves down her back. You need to be seen, Valentina explained, adding final touches to Elena's makeup. The rumors about Luca having a secret family are everywhere. If you hide, people will assume the worst. But if you appear at his side, confident and beautiful, they'll see strength. And if I'm not confident? Elena asked weakly. Valentina's expression softened. Then you fake it. Trust me. I've been faking confidence in this world since I was 15 years old. Eventually, it becomes real. Luca was waiting at the bottom of the grand staircase when Elena descended. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, his dark hair slicked back, the crowned wolf tattoo just visible above his collar. When he looked up and saw her, his face went completely blank, that telltale sign that something had hit him hard enough to shatter his composure. You look. He stopped, started again. You're beautiful. Valentina's handiwork. No. He moved to meet her at the bottom of the stairs, offering his arm with old-world formality. This is all you. My sister just helped you see it. The gala was held at the Bellini Hotel, and Elena recognized half the faces in attendance. Politicians, business moguls, socialites, and scattered among them like wolves in sheep's clothing, the various figures of the city's criminal underworld. She kept her spine straight and her smile pleasant, exactly as Valentina had coached her, but inside she was trembling. Luca stayed close, not possessively so. He gave her space to breathe, to speak with others, to accept congratulations on Sofia's birth from strangers who shouldn't have known about it. But he was always there, a solid presence at the edge of her vision, ready to intervene the moment she needed him. And then she saw her, Viviana de Luca. The name conjured old insecurities Elena had thought she'd buried. Viviana was everything Elena was not. Tall, blonde, impeccably polished, born into wealth rather than married or loved into it. She had been Luca's constant companion at events like this before Elena had entered his life, and according to gossip, she had made no secret of her displeasure when Luca had chosen a nobody accountant over the De Luca heiress. Now, Viviana was crossing the ballroom with single-minded determination, her ice-blue gaze fixed on Elena like a hawk spotting prey. So, Viviana said, stopping directly in Elena's path, you're the one who managed to trap Luca Moretti with a baby. I must admit, I didn't think you had it in you. The words hit like a slap. Elena felt the color drain from her face. Viviana. The warning came from behind Elena, Luca's voice, cold as winter. Viviana's smile widened, but there was something brittle around the edges. Luca, darling, I was just congratulating your... What is she, exactly? Mistress? Baby mama? I'm never quite sure what the terminology is these days. Elena found her voice. I'm the mother of his child. And beyond that, I don't think I owe you any explanations. Something flickered in Viviana's eyes. Surprise, maybe, that Elena had dared to push back. Oh, but you do, sweetheart. You see, while you were playing house in whatever hovel you've been hiding in, I was the one attending every function, every meeting, every negotiation at Luca's side. I was the one keeping up appearances. And now you stroll in with your postpartum glow and expect everyone to forget that you abandoned him. Enough. Luca stepped forward, placing himself partially between Elena and the other woman. His voice was soft, dangerously soft. You forget yourself, Viviana. I forget nothing. Viviana's composure cracked slightly, revealing something raw beneath. I was supposed to be standing where she is. You promised me. I promised you nothing. Luca's gray eyes were glacial. You assumed, you presumed, and you made a fool of yourself in the process. He turned his back on her, the ultimate dismissal in their world, and offered his hand to Elena. Dance with me. Elena took his hand. They swept onto the dance floor together, and she could feel every eye in the room following them. Luca's hand settled at the small of her back, warm and steady, while his other held hers with the careful reverence she was beginning to recognize as his default when touching her. I'm sorry, he murmured against her ear. Viviana has never known when to quit. Was there ever anything between you? The question slipped out before Elena could stop it. Luca pulled back enough to meet her eyes. No, there was nothing. She wanted there to be, her father wanted there to be, but I was never interested. His thumb traced small circles against her back. I never wanted anyone the way I wanted you, Elena. That was true before you left, and it's been true every day since. But you let people think. I let people assume whatever they wanted. His voice dropped, because it was easier than admitting the truth. Which is? His forehead touched hers. That I've been ruined for anyone else since the moment I met you. That every woman I've stood beside at events like this has been a ghost, because the only face I see is yours. His breath was warm against her lips. I love you, Elena. I've loved you for years, and I'm tired of pretending otherwise. The music swelled around them. The chandeliers glittered, and Elena felt the last of her walls begin to crumble. I'm scared, she admitted. Of me. Of this. Of how much I want it. Of how badly it could hurt if it falls apart again. His arms tightened around her. Then we take it slow. We build it back piece by piece. And if it falls apart, we build it again. His lips brushed her temple. I'm not going anywhere, Elena. Not ever again. They danced until the music ended. And when she looked up at him in the sudden silence, she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Not love, though that was there too, but fear. Raw, naked fear. Luca? What's wrong? His gaze had shifted to something beyond her shoulder. His jaw was tight, his body suddenly tense against hers. Ferretti, he said quietly. He's here. Elena's blood froze. She turned slowly, following his gaze, and saw him. Matteo Ferretti, standing near the entrance with a glass of champagne in his hand and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was older than Luca, silver threading through his dark hair. But his build was solid and his presence commanded attention even from across the room. He was staring directly at them. No, not at them. Her. Luca. Don't react. Luca's hand pressed firmly against her back. Don't give him the satisfaction. We're going to walk calmly toward Nico, and then you're going to let him take you home. I'm not leaving you. You are leaving. His voice was granite. Because right now, the most dangerous thing in this room is your presence. He came here to see you, Elena, to confirm that you're real. And every second you stand here, you give him more ammunition. She understood logically that he was right, but the thought of leaving him here, surrounded by enemies, with that predator's gaze burning holes in her back. Please. The word cracked. Don't make me go. Luca's expression softened almost imperceptibly. I'll be right behind you. Promise. But I need to handle this, and I can't do it if I'm worried about your safety. Nico appeared at her elbow, his presence solid and reassuring. Ma'am, the car is waiting. Elena looked at Luca one last time, at his gray eyes, his tense jaw, the crowned wolf tattoo just visible above his collar, and nodded. Be careful, she whispered. Always. She let Nico lead her away, but just before she reached the exit, she heard it. Matteo Ferretti's voice, cutting through the noise of the gala like a blade through silk. Beautiful child you have, Moretti. She looks just like her father. Elena didn't turn around. She walked faster. And behind her, she heard Luca's response. Quiet, deadly, promising violence. Touch her, and I'll make what happened to your brother look like mercy. The drive home was silent. Elena sat in the back of the SUV with her hands clasped tightly in her lap, staring out the window at streets that blurred past. Nico drove without speaking, his eyes constantly flicking to the mirrors, watching for tails. When they finally pulled through the estate gates, Elena released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Mrs. Moretti. I'm not his wife, Nico. The head of security paused. With respect, ma'am, you are in every way that matters. He'd burn the world for you. She didn't know how to respond to that. Valentina was waiting inside, Sofia already asleep in her arms. I heard what happened. The whole city is talking about it. Already. Matteo Ferretti doesn't crash Moretti events for no reason. Valentina transferred the baby to Elena's arms with practiced ease. Something's coming. I can feel it. Elena looked down at Sofia's sleeping face, at those tiny features that were so clearly Luca's, and felt a fear unlike anything she had ever known. Where's Luca? Still at the gala. Nico left 3 men with him. Valentina's expression was grim. He'll handle it. He always does. But hours passed. The clock struck midnight, then 1, then 2. Elena paced her suite with Sofia in her arms, unable to sleep, unable to think about anything other than Matteo Ferretti's cold smile and the promise of violence in Luca's voice. At 2:47 a.m., she heard footsteps in the hallway. Her heart seized. The door opened, and Luca walked in. He was disheveled in a way she had never seen before. His suit jacket missing, his sleeves rolled up to reveal the full-sleeve tattoos on his forearms, his collar unbuttoned far enough that the crowned wolf on his neck was fully visible. There was blood on his knuckles, blood on his shirt, and something wild in his eyes that made her take an involuntary step back. Are you hurt? Her voice was barely a whisper. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. Careful of Sofia, always careful of Sofia, but desperate in a way that stole her breath. I'm not hurt. His voice was muffled against her hair. It's not my blood. She should have been horrified, should have recoiled from the violence he embodied, from the confirmation that he had done terrible things just hours ago. Instead, she pressed closer, her free hand fisting in his ruined shirt, her body trembling with relief. I thought. She couldn't finish the sentence. I know. He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. I'm sorry. I should have called. I should have. He stopped, his gaze dropping to Sofia's sleeping face, and something in his expression shattered completely. She's safe, Elena said softly. We're both safe. Luca's hand trembled as he reached out to touch Sofia's cheek. Ferretti won't stop. He's fixated now. He knows you're my weakness, and he'll use it. Then what do we do? His gray eyes lifted to hers, and in them she saw something she had never seen before. Not fear, exactly, but vulnerability, openness, a willingness to be honest about the danger they faced. I have a plan, he said quietly. But you're not going to like it. Tell me. We get married. The words hung in the air between them. Publicly, officially, in a ceremony that every crime family in the country attends. We make it absolutely clear that you and Sofia are under the protection of the Moretti name. Not just because I love you, but because attacking you would mean war with every ally I have. Elena's breath caught. Luca, I know it's fast. I know we're still rebuilding trust. But Ferretti is playing a dangerous game, and the only way to beat him is to raise the stakes beyond what he's willing to pay. His hands cupped her face, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. I'm not asking you to love me yet. I'm not asking you to forgive me for all the ways I failed you. I'm only asking you to trust me enough to let me protect you, to let me protect our daughter. She looked at him, at this man who had terrified her so deeply that she'd run for 8 months. Who had found her anyway, who had held their daughter with trembling hands and whispered promises in the dark. She looked at the blood on his knuckles and the desperation in his eyes and the love that had never, not once, wavered. "Yes," she whispered. Luca's entire body went still. "Yes. Yes, I'll marry you." Her hand came up to cover his. "Not because I'm scared. Not because I need protection. Because She stopped, took a breath, and finally said the words she'd been holding back for 8 months. "Because I love you, Luca. I never stopped. And I'm tired of pretending I did." We'll continue this story in the next part. If you're enjoying it, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Your support means everything and helps us bring you more stories like this one. The kiss that followed was not fierce or demanding. It was soft, reverent. The brush of his lips against hers was a question, not a claim. Asking permission rather than taking what he wanted. Elena answered by pressing closer, by tangling her free hand in his hair, by pouring 8 months of loneliness and longing into that single perfect moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Luca rested his forehead against hers. "I don't deserve you," he murmured. "Probably not." She managed a small smile. "But you're stuck with me anyway. Forever. Forever." Sofia stirred between them, making a small sound of complaint at being jostled, and they both looked down at her with matching expressions of tenderness. "Forever," Luca repeated, reaching out to trace their daughter's cheek with one blood-stained finger. "Both of you. Forever." The next morning, Elena woke to find a diamond ring on her pillow. It was not subtle. Nothing about Luca Moretti was subtle. The center stone was a deep, rich emerald surrounded by a halo of smaller diamonds, set in a platinum band that caught the morning light and scattered it across the ceiling in tiny rainbows. There was a note beside it, written in Luca's sharp, elegant hand. "I bought this 2 years ago, the day after I first told you I loved you. I've been waiting for the right moment ever since. Elena stared at the ring for a long moment. Then she put it on. Word of their engagement spread through the household within hours, carried by servants who noticed the ring on her finger, confirmed by Valentina's gleeful squeal when she burst into Elena's suite unannounced. By noon, the entire staff knew. By evening, judging by the flurry of phone calls Luca was fielding in his study, half of the criminal underworld knew as well. "The wedding will be in 3 weeks," he said when he finally emerged, looking exhausted but pleased. "Every family that matters has already RSVP'd. Ferretti won't dare make a move with that many witnesses watching." 3 weeks. Elena nearly choked on her tea. "That's not enough time to plan. Valentina has it handled. She's been secretly planning my wedding since we were teenagers." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. She just never expected the bride to be someone she actually likes. The days that followed were a blur of fittings and consultations and a parade of vendors who treated Elena like visiting royalty. Valentina proved to be a force of nature when it came to event planning. Demanding, exacting, and absolutely unstoppable once she set her mind to something. Elena found herself swept along in the whirlwind, making decisions about flowers and cake flavors and seating arrangements while Sofia slept peacefully in a carrier beside her. But through it all, she noticed something strange. Luca was pulling away. Not physically. He still held her hand, still kissed her forehead when he passed her in the hallway, still appeared at the nursery each evening to rock Sofia to sleep. But there was a distance in his eyes that hadn't been there before. A tension in his shoulders that never quite relaxed. And more than once, she caught him staring at her with an expression that looked almost guilty. "What's wrong?" she asked finally, cornering him in his study one evening after putting Sofia to bed. Luca looked up from the papers scattered across his desk. "Nothing. Don't lie to me." She moved closer, close enough to see the exhaustion carved into his face. "You said we were building something new, something honest. So be honest." For a long moment he said nothing. Then, slowly, he rose from his chair and moved to the window, his back to her. "I received a letter this morning," he said quietly. "From Ferretti." Elena's blood chilled. "What did it say?" "It contained photographs." His voice was carefully controlled. "Of you, at the hospital, on the night Sofia was born." She felt the color drain from her face. How? There's a traitor in my organization. He turned to face her, and the rage in his eyes was barely contained. Someone close enough to have been in that hospital, close enough to have taken those photographs without being noticed. And until I find them, I can't. He stopped, his hands clenched at his sides. I can't keep you safe. You've doubled the guards. The guards are meaningless if one of them is reporting to Ferretti. He crossed the room to stand before her, his hands coming up to cup her face. I want to postpone the wedding. The words landed like a blow. What? Not cancel. Never cancel. But postpone until I can be certain that the ceremony won't be used as an opportunity to. His voice caught. I won't risk losing you. Not again. Not when I've only just gotten you back. Elena's heart ached at the fear in his voice. This man who commanded armies, who made kings kneel, reduced to this trembling vulnerability by the thought of losing her. No, she said quietly. His brow furrowed. No, we're not postponing. She stepped closer, her hands flattening against his chest. The wedding happens in 3 weeks, exactly as planned. Because that's what you need. A show of strength. A statement that Ferretti can't shake you. Elena, listen to me. She held his gaze. You've spent your whole life protecting everyone else. Protecting your family, your organization, your territory. But you've never let anyone protect you. Her fingers traced the edge of his collar, brushing the tattooed wolf on his neck. Let me protect you now. Let me stand beside you at that altar and show everyone, including Matteo Ferretti, that we are not afraid. Luca stared at her with something that looked like wonder. You've changed. I had a baby. A small smile tugged at her lips. That changes everything. He pulled her against him, burying his face in her hair. I don't deserve you. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. She held him until the tension drained from his shoulders. Until his breathing slowed and his arms loosened from their desperate grip. Until he pulled back enough to look at her with something new in his eyes. Not fear anymore, but determination. Hope. 3 weeks, he said quietly. And then you'll be mine forever. I'm already yours. She pressed a kiss to his jaw. I've been yours since the night we met. I just forgot for a while. Finding the traitor became Luca's obsession. He disappeared into his study for hours each day, emerging only for meals and his nightly visits to the nursery. Nico hovered at his shoulder constantly, the two of them locked in intense conversations that stopped abruptly whenever Elena appeared. The tension in the house grew thicker by the day. Staff members who had once laughed and chattered in the hallways now moved in silence, eyes downcast, acutely aware that suspicion had fallen on all of them. Elena did her best to maintain normalcy. She attended fittings, approved menus, and practiced walking in the impossibly high heels Valentina insisted were non-negotiable. She fed Sofia and bathed her and sang to her in the quiet hours of the night. And she watched Luca slowly unravel, helpless to stop it. 1 week before the wedding, she found him in the nursery at 3 in the morning. He was sitting in the rocking chair with Sofia cradled against his chest, but his eyes were fixed on something far beyond the walls. His face was haggard, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled. Collar unbuttoned, sleeves rolled up, dark stubble shadowing his jaw. Luca! He blinked, seeming to return from wherever he'd been. Elena! What are you? I heard her fussing. She moved closer, perching on the arm of the rocking chair. You look terrible. I feel terrible. His hand came up to rub his eyes. We found him. The traitor. Her heart lurched. Who? Dante. The name emerged like gravel. He was one of Nico's most trusted men. He's been feeding Ferretti information for almost a year. What happens now? Luca's jaw tightened. Now we question him. And then... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Is it over? Elena asked quietly. The danger. Ferretti knows everything Dante knew, which means he knows our routines, our security protocols, the layout of the estate. Luca's gray eyes lifted to meet hers. It's not over. It won't be over until Ferretti is dealt with permanently. Then deal with him. The words emerged with more conviction than she felt. You've built an empire, Luca. You've destroyed rivals more powerful than him. Whatever needs to be done, do it. Even if it means becoming the monster you were afraid of? The question hung in the air between them. Elena looked at him. At this man who held their daughter so gently, who had spent weeks earning her trust back, who looked at her like she was his reason for breathing. Then she looked at Sofia, sleeping peacefully against his chest, completely unaware of the dangers surrounding her. I was wrong, she said finally, about what I said before, about you turning her into something like you. She reached out to touch his face. You're not a monster, Luca. You're a father who loves his daughter. And if being a monster is what it takes to keep her safe, then be a monster. I'll love you anyway. Something broke open in his expression. He reached for her with his free hand, pulling her down until her forehead rested against his. I love you, he breathed. God, I love you so much it terrifies me. I know. She pressed a kiss to his lips. I love you too. They sat there in the darkness of the nursery, the three of them, and for a moment the world outside ceased to exist. There was only this warmth and love and the steady rhythm of Sofia's breathing. Tomorrow the world would intrude again. Tomorrow there would be war and blood and terrible decisions. But tonight there was only family. The wedding day dawned clear and bright. A good omen, according to Valentina, who had spent the entire previous night consulting with various superstitious relatives. Elena woke to find the West Wing in chaos. Stylists and makeup artists and a small army of florists transforming the space into something out of a fairy tale. You're not supposed to see the bride before the ceremony, Valentina scolded when Luca appeared in the doorway an hour before they were scheduled to begin. It's bad luck. I don't believe in luck. His gray eyes found Elena across the room. I believe in preparation. He was dressed in an impeccable black suit, his dark hair slicked back perfectly, the crowned wolf tattoo just visible above his collar. He looked exactly like what he was, a king preparing to claim his queen. We swept the venue 3 times this morning, he said, ignoring his sister's protests as he crossed to Elena. Every guest has been vetted. Every entrance is covered. Ferretti won't get within a mile of you. I know. She reached up to straighten his already perfect tie. You've told me a dozen times. I'll tell you a dozen more if that's what it takes. His hands came up to cup her face, careful not to disturb the elaborate hairstyle the stylist had spent an hour creating. I need you to know that if anything feels wrong, anything at all, you find Nico and you get out. Understood. Luca. Understood. She sighed. Understood. He kissed her forehead and disappeared, leaving behind the lingering scent of his cologne and a flutter in her stomach that might have been nerves or might have been anticipation. The ceremony was held in the estate's private chapel, a jewel box of stained glass and polished wood that had hosted Moretti weddings for 5 generations. Elena walked the aisle alone, having no father to give her away, her gown a masterpiece of ivory silk and delicate lace that trailed behind her like a whisper. And at the altar Luca waited. The look on his face when she appeared, the raw wonder, the overwhelming love, the tears he didn't quite manage to blink away, would stay with her forever. He watched her approach like she was a miracle, like he still couldn't quite believe she was real, and when she finally reached him and placed her hands in his fingers were trembling. You came, he whispered. Did you think I wouldn't? I thought, he stopped, shook his head. It doesn't matter what I thought. You're here. That's all that matters. The priest began the ceremony, his words washing over them in waves of Latin and Italian and English, but Elena barely heard any of it. She was lost in Luca's eyes, in the warmth of his hands around hers, in the overwhelming certainty that this man, this life, this family, was exactly where she was meant to be. When it came time for the vows, Luca spoke first. I am not a good man, he said quietly, his voice carrying through the silent chapel. I've done terrible things. I've made enemies out of nations and ghosts out of rivals. But you, his voice cracked. You looked at me and saw something worth saving. something worth loving, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that. He reached into his pocket and produced not a ring but a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age, worn soft at the edges. This is a letter I wrote 3 years ago, on the night you agreed to move in with me. I never sent it because I was afraid. Afraid of being vulnerable. Afraid of giving you power over me. He pressed the letter into her hands. Read it later when you're alone, and know that everything in it is still true. Every word. Every promise. Elena's throat closed with emotion. She took the letter with shaking hands and tucked it carefully into her bodice. Then it was her turn. I spent 8 months running from you, she said, her voice thick with tears. And every single day, I missed you more than I thought it was possible to miss another person. You were there in my dreams, in the way our daughter moved inside me, in every sunset and every rainstorm and every quiet moment when I let myself remember what it felt like to be loved by you. She squeezed his hands. I don't want to run anymore. I want to build a life with you. A real life, with all the chaos and danger and impossible complications that come with loving Luca Moretti. I want to raise our daughter together. I want to grow old with you. I want... Her voice broke. I want forever. If you'll have me. Forever isn't long enough. He pulled her closer. But I'll take it. They exchanged rings, his a simple platinum band, hers the emerald engagement ring joined now by a matching wedding band. And when the priest finally pronounced them husband and wife, Luca kissed her like a man starving for water who had finally found an ocean. The guests erupted in applause. And across the chapel, hidden among the crowd, a pair of cold eyes watched and calculated. The reception was a masterpiece of controlled elegance. Champagne flowing, music playing. 500 of the most powerful people in the country gathered to witness the union of two families that had just become infinitely more dangerous to threaten. Elena danced with Luca until her feet ached, then danced with Nico, then with various relatives and business associates whose names she promptly forgot. Sofia presided over the evening from a specially constructed cradle near the head table, fawned over by a rotating cast of admirers who couldn't seem to believe that Luca Moretti, the Luca Moretti, had produced something so small and perfect. She has your eyes, one elderly woman cooed. The Moretti eyes. They've been the making and unmaking of men for generations. Elena smiled and accepted the compliment, but her attention was elsewhere. Luca had disappeared 20 minutes ago, pulled away by Nico for some whispered consultation that had left his face grim. He hadn't returned. Valentina. Elena caught her sister-in-law's arm as she passed. Where's Luca? Something flickered across Valentina's face. Concern, quickly masked. He's handling something. He'll be back soon. Handling what? Elena. Don't patronize me. Elena's voice hardened. What's happening? Valentina hesitated, then leaned closer. One of Ferretti's men was spotted near the east gate 15 minutes ago. Luca thinks it might be a distraction, a way to draw attention while something else happens elsewhere. Elena's blood turned to ice. Where's Sofia? With the nanny, by the head table. But Elena was already moving, pushing through the crowd with a single-minded determination that sent guests scattering. The head table came into view, the flowers, the centerpieces, the elaborate place settings. The empty cradle. Sofia! Her scream cut through the music, through the chatter, through everything. The room went silent. Faces turned toward her. And then chaos. Guards materialized from nowhere. Guests were herded toward exits. Luca appeared at her side, his face white, his hand gripping hers hard enough to bruise. What happened? Where is she? I don't know. She was right there, the nanny. Elena's voice broke. Luca, where is our daughter? Find her. His voice was deadly calm. Find her now. The search swept through the estate like a storm. Every room, every closet, every hidden corner illuminated and examined by an army of guards. Elena followed in their wake, calling Sofia's name, her heart shattering a little more with every empty room. And then, 15 minutes later, Nico's voice crackled through the security radio. North Wing. She's here. She's safe. Elena ran. She found Sofia in the arms of the nanny, a young woman named Clara who was sobbing uncontrollably, in a small sitting room in the north wing. The baby was crying, but she was unharmed. Whole. Perfect. What happened? Elena demanded, pulling Sofia into her arms. How did she get here? A man, Clara gasped between sobs. He said Mr. Moretti sent him. Said there was a security threat and I needed to move the baby. I didn't know. I thought. Who was he? Luca's voice cut through like a blade. What did he look like? Clara shook her head helplessly. I don't. He was wearing a uniform. I thought he was one of the guards. Ferretti. Luca's face was carved from granite. He was here, in my house, with my daughter. He turned to Nico. Lock everything down. No one leaves until we know exactly how he got in and where he went. The hours that followed were a nightmare of questioning and searching and slowly mounting dread. By dawn, they had their answer. Matteo Ferretti had infiltrated the wedding by impersonating a member of the catering staff. He had waited until the crowd was distracted by Elena's dancing, had convinced Clara to move Sofia using a uniform and a convincing lie, and had then disappeared. No exit had seen him leave. No camera had caught his departure. He had come to prove a point, and he had proven it. I failed you. Luca stood at the nursery window, watching the sunrise with hollow eyes. Sofia was sleeping peacefully in Elena's arms, unaware of how close she had come to being taken. I swore I would keep you safe and I failed. You didn't fail. He was here. Luca's fist slammed against the window frame. In my house, at my wedding, holding our daughter. His voice broke. If he had wanted to take her, he could have. That's what he wanted me to know. That's the message. Elena moved to his side, shifting Sofia to one arm so she could touch his face with her free hand. We're still here. She's still here. Whatever message he was sending, we survived it. This time, his gray eyes were haunted. What about next time? What about the time after that? Then we fight. She held his gaze. We prepare. We plan. And we make sure there's no next time. How? He has resources I can't match, connections I can't touch. Then we make new connections. Find new resources. Elena's voice hardened with a resolve she hadn't known she possessed. I didn't survive 8 months of hiding, Luca. I didn't bring our daughter into the world just to lose her to some power-hungry criminal who thinks he can use her against us. If Ferretti wants a war, we give him one. But we do it together. Luca stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, something shifted in his expression. The despair giving way to determination. The fear giving way to cold, calculated rage. Together, he repeated. Together. He pulled her into his arms, careful of Sofia sleeping between them, and held on like she was the only thing anchoring him to sanity. I love you, he breathed against her hair. I love you more than I've ever loved anything in my life. And I swear to you, on my family's name, on my daughter's future, on everything I am, Matteo Ferretti will never touch either of you again. The war that followed was quiet and surgical. Luca dismantled Ferretti's empire piece by piece, buying out his businesses, turning his allies, exposing his secrets. He did it not with violence but with patience, with strategy, with the cold, methodical precision of a man who had finally found something worth destroying himself for. Elena watched it happen from the safety of the estate, surrounded by guards and security systems and the constant, reassuring presence of her husband. She nursed Sofia and read bedtime stories and learned to sleep through the night again, even knowing that somewhere out there, Ferretti was still plotting, still planning, still waiting for his moment to strike. 3 months after the wedding, that moment came. Elena was in the garden with Sofia, enjoying one of the last warm days of autumn, when she heard the shots. 2 cracks, sharp and distant, somewhere beyond the estate walls. Then silence. She gathered Sofia and ran. Nico met her at the door, his face grim. Inside. Now. What happened? We got him. Nico's voice was flat, professional. Ferretti. He tried to breach the north perimeter. The snipers. Is Luca. He's fine. He's with the body now, making sure it's really over. Elena sagged against the doorframe. Sofia clutched against her chest. It's over. It's over. She found Luca in his study 2 hours later, staring out the window with a glass of whiskey in his hand. He didn't turn when she entered. I killed him. His voice was strange, hollow. I didn't pull the trigger, but I gave the order. I watched him fall. You protected your family. Elena moved to stand beside him. You did what you had to do. I know. He finally looked at her, and she saw it. The exhaustion, the relief, the guilt that would probably never fully disappear. But I need you to understand what you married, Elena. What Sofia was born into. This is my world. Violence and death and choices that destroy parts of your soul. His voice cracked. Can you really live with that? She took his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. I can live with anything as long as I have you. As long as we have each other. His arms came around her, pulling her close. I love you, he murmured against her hair. I know. She pressed her lips to his jaw. I love you too. They stood there as the sun set beyond the window, casting long shadows across the study floor. Outside, guards were cleaning up the remains of a war that was finally over. Inside, a father held his wife and thought about the daughter sleeping peacefully upstairs. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. There would always be new threats, new enemies, new reasons to be afraid. But there would also always be this love, stubborn and fierce and refusing to surrender. A family that had fought through lies and fear and 8 months of separation to find their way back to each other. A little girl with her father's eyes who would grow up knowing exactly how much she was loved. Elena pulled back slightly, searching Luca's face. Take me to bed. His eyebrow arched. The baby is with Valentina. For the next 3 hours. Something shifted in his eyes. Something dark and hungry and carefully controlled. Are you sure? I've been sure since the moment you walked into that delivery room. She rose on her toes to press her lips against his. I just needed time to remember it. He kissed her then. Not gently, not reverently, but with the full force of months of restraint finally breaking free. His hands tangled in her hair. His body pressed her against the window. When she gasped, he swallowed the sound. Bedroom, he growled against her lips. Now. They made it there somehow, though Elena would later have no memory of the journey. There was only his hands, his mouth, the desperate need that had been building since the moment he appeared in that delivery room and changed everything. He undressed her slowly, reverently, pressing kisses to every inch of skin he revealed. She returned the favor, tracing the tattoos that covered his arms and chest, the crowned wolf on his neck, the sang on his knuckles. When they finally came together, it was with a desperation that left them both breathless. After, they lay tangled in silk sheets, her head on his chest, his hand tracing lazy patterns on her back. I have something for you, he said quietly. You've given me enough. Not this. He reached toward the nightstand and produced a small velvet box. Open it. Inside was a pendant, a single perfect diamond shaped like a teardrop, suspended from a delicate platinum chain. It was my mother's, Luca said softly. My father gave it to her on the day Valentina was born. She wore it every day until she died. He reached out to brush a strand of hair from Elena's face. I want you to have it, to wear it, to pass it down to Sofia someday, when she becomes a mother herself. Tears streamed down Elena's face. Luca, you're not just my wife. He fastened the chain around her neck, his fingers brushing her collarbone. You're the mother of my child, the keeper of my heart, the only person in the world who has ever made me want to be better than I am. He kissed her forehead. This was always meant to be yours. I just needed to find you first. She pulled him down and kissed him until neither of them could breathe. The months that followed were the happiest of Elena's life. Sofia grew from a tiny newborn into a babbling, curious infant who had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. Luca, freed from the constant threat of Ferretti, began the slow process of legitimizing his businesses, moving away from the darker aspects of his empire toward something that might someday be respectable. Elena started a charitable foundation in Sofia's name, funding scholarships and childcare programs for single mothers who had found themselves in situations not unlike her own. They were a family, a real family with all the chaos and joy and mundane frustrations that came with it. 1 year after the wedding, they returned to the hospital where Sofia had been born. "I can't believe she's won already," Elena murmured, watching Sofia toddle across the lobby on unsteady legs. "It feels like yesterday I was lying in that delivery room, terrified out of my mind. And then I walked in," Luca said dryly, "and made everything worse." She grinned at his offended expression. "Don't look at me like that. You know it's true. I was being dramatic. You were being terrifying. Same thing in my family." She laughed and tucked herself under his arm as they watched Sofia attempt to befriend a nearby nurse. The baby was fearless, inherited from her father, Elena suspected, and completely unconcerned about making a scene in public places. "She's going to rule the world someday," Luca said. "God help us all." They had dinner that night at a small restaurant in the city, the same restaurant where they'd had their first date 5 years ago. Sofia sat in a high chair between them, systematically destroying a breadstick while her parents shared a bottle of wine and memories. "I was so nervous," Elena admitted. "I changed my outfit 3 times. Valentina had to physically stop me from canceling. I was nervous too." Luca's thumb traced her knuckles. "Though I hit it better." "You hit it perfectly. I thought you were completely unaffected." "I was terrified." His gray eyes held hers. "I'd never wanted anyone the way I wanted you. I was convinced I would ruin it somehow." "You almost did." She smiled to soften the words. "Several times. But you stayed." "I stayed." He lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her wedding ring. "Best decision you ever made." "Second best." She glanced at Sofia, who had managed to get breadcrumbs in her hair. "She was the best." Luca's expression softened into something that still made Elena's heart skip after all this time. "Yes," he agreed quietly. "She was." They walked home through streets that had once been battlegrounds and were now just streets. Ordinary, quiet, safe. Sofia fell asleep in her father's arms before they reached the estate gates, and Luca carried her upstairs to the nursery while Elena changed into comfortable clothes. When he returned to their bedroom, she was sitting on the edge of the bed, something small clutched in her hands. "What's that?" He sat beside her. She handed him the test. 2 pink lines. Luca stared at it for a long moment. Then his eyes lifted to hers, wide with shock and disbelief and something that looked terrifyingly like hope. "You're pregnant." Elena's voice trembled. "I found out this morning. I wanted to wait until after dinner to tell you." But she didn't get to finish the sentence. He kissed her so thoroughly that she forgot what she'd been saying. Forgot everything except his hands on her face, his tears mixing with hers, his whispered promises against her lips. "I love you," he said when they finally broke apart. "I love you. I love you. I love you." "I know." She laughed through her tears. "I love you too." He pulled her into his lap and held her there, one hand pressed against her still flat stomach, the other wrapped around her waist. "We're going to need a bigger nursery," he murmured. "We're going to need a lot of things. I'll handle it." His lips brushed her temple. "I'll handle everything. You just be here. Be healthy. Be mine. I've always been yours." She traced the crowned wolf on his neck. "Since the very beginning." "Since the very beginning," he agreed. "And forever after." The sun rose over the Moretti estate, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. In the nursery, Sofia slept peacefully, one tiny fist clutching her stuffed elephant. In the master bedroom, Luca held his wife while their second child grew between them. And somewhere in the city, people were waking up to a world that was a little bit safer, a little bit kinder, a little bit more full of love than it had been the day before. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There would still be challenges ahead. New enemies, new fears, new moments when everything seemed about to fall apart. But there would also be a family, a love that had survived separation, betrayal, and death threats to emerge stronger than ever. Elena pressed her lips to Luca's collarbone and smiled. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I'm thinking that I tried to hide from you for 8 months. That I was convinced I could raise Sofia alone. Keep her safe. Give her a normal life." She laughed softly. "I was an idiot. You were scared." His hand tightened on her hip. "And I gave you reasons to be. Maybe. But I'm not scared anymore. No. No." She pulled back to meet his eyes, those steel-gray eyes that had once terrified her, that now filled her with nothing but warmth. "I know exactly who you are, Luca Moretti. I know what you've done and what you're capable of doing. And I love you anyway. All of you. Forever." His response was not words but action. Pulling her closer, kissing her deeper, showing her with his body what language couldn't capture. Outside, the world continued to turn. Inside, two hearts that had spent too long apart finally beat together. And in the nursery down the hall, a little girl with her father's eyes slept on, dreaming of a future full of love and light and the unshakable certainty that she would always, always be protected. This was their family. This was their forever. And nothing, not danger, not distance, not death itself, would ever tear them apart again. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe for more emotional tales of love, redemption, and dark romance. Your support means everything and helps bring more stories like this to life. Until next time, the end.